Well, we are so excited to be joined by Rick Edinger from Carnegie Mellon University. Rick went to school at Manhattan School of Music, Cleveland Institute of Music, Brooklyn College, and Hunter College. And I'm going to let Rick tell you the history of all those schools in a second here. Rick's been on Broadway in the revival of Pacific Overtures, lots of wonderful acting gigs on TV as the world turns. Also a music director for Joe Iconis' new musical workshop, the unauthorized Hunter S. Thompson show, that was at La Jolla, the pre-Broadway workshop of Joy, which had friend of the pod, Erica Henningsen, in it as well. Previously, Rick's been on faculty at Shenandoah Conservatory, the County College of Morris, the College of St. Elizabeth. Has been a vocal coach for over nearly 20 years. He's currently an associate professor of music theater and the area chair for the acting musical theater program at Carnegie Mellon, which we remember is still in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They take classes of about 12 actors, 12 MTs, offer degrees in BFA acting and musical theater. Rick, welcome on the pod. How are you feeling today?
Great. Thank you for having me. That was a very generous introduction.
Oh, yeah. We like to give a lengthy bio to our guests to really make them feel warm and accomplished on the show.
Yeah.
So I mentioned in the pre-show, you gave me a little rundown of the education. If you wouldn't mind, just in terms of talking about your own educational path, talk me through these. I see 4 schools and how the degrees and how they finished. And, this is something that many of our students do with their unique path. So talk me through how that worked for you.
I love this question. I do have a very unique way into musical theater. I think my heart has always been in musical theater. I was working on getting my equity card while I was still in high school. I ended up going to Cleveland Institute of Music in the Young Artist program, which I don't think exists anymore, probably because we were a rebel class.
But this is the Stone Age back then. So
Yeah,
not
yeah,
the old
yeah,
artists,
back
but
in
the
the
young
covered
artists.
wagon
Yeah.
days.
Mm-hmm.
At Cleveland Institute of Music, I was a young artist. So I did my senior year of high school and first year of college at the same time. And then I continued there for my sophomore year. I was a voice and piano major, and I was studying classical music, though my heart was in musical theater. Go figure.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, oh yeah, there are people who take these degrees and move on in musical theater. So after my second year, I really wanted to be in New York. I begged my parents to transfer to Manhattan School of Music. Got a nice scholarship, went there for the first year, where they put me in all first year classes and didn't transfer any of my credits. Um, and then coming from a very middle class family. I didn't want for anything, but also did not have any sort of like excessive fancy needs. My dad was in the military. My mom was a cafeteria worker.
Mm-hmm.
And so they offered to refinance their home to put me
Mm-hmm.
through the rest of college for the next 3 years. And at that point, I dropped out of college,
Mm-hmm.
and just started auditioning and pursuing work. And fortunately, that's when I was in Pacific Overtures and did Sondheim's 75th birthday concerts all over, did some regional work. But then, eventually needed that degree.
Right.
I needed something
If you're going to come back and teach at the very
finish.
least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because I also had my heart in teaching.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually went to the City Universities of New York, Brooklyn College and Hunter College, which were fantastic places for me. I studied with basically the same teachers that I studied with at Manhattan School of
Mm-hmm.
Music, just at a much lower
Much cheaper.
cost,
Yep.
$2,000 a semester. And it was probably the best decision of my life. And that's where I started getting the connections into teaching and adjunct work.
Yep.
But yeah, it's a very non-traditional path. My master's degree is in collaborative piano,
Yep.
which is essentially accompanying and vocal coaching.
Yep.
And so yeah, it's
It's
a
it's
odd path.
such a great story for the listeners to hear. And, many of our listeners, of course, are MTCA students. And so those people tend to be relatively resourced and they know they're going to be pursuing a college degree and they maybe have the finances to be able to support that. But a lot of our listeners also are people who this is a free resource and are
Yeah.
trying to figure out how can I, and is it important enough to me to rack up a lot of debt potentially to pursue this? And it's a conversation we have a lot of going, do you want to be saddled with, in this case, it would have been your parents saddled with a lot of debt, but do you want to be saddled with a lot of debt as you walk into this industry where you might not be making huge amounts of money,
Right.
even if you're really successful? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I usually I ask people to look at it as like, a small car loan
Yep.
versus a house.
Versus a home loan versus
Right.
something you're
Yeah.
paying off for
Like,
30 years or whatever. Yeah.
yeah. Like, you can pay down a car loan over 30 years
Yep.
at within reason. And so it's a reasonable amount of investment.
Yep.
A home loan is much different.
I mean, our very first podcast guest, Telly Leung, came on the pod, and it was, I guess, 20 years after graduating school, and he was just paying down his debt finally after like 6 Broadway shows or whatever the number is.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
truly.
it's a hard thing to do. Okay, well, let's get into Carnegie Mellon. So, our stalwart regular listeners will potentially have already listened to our wonderful interview with Catherine Moore a few years back, our follow up with Don Wadsworth. So, depending where they are on their podcast journey, this could be their very first introduction to Carnegie Mellon or their third. So, we're going to try to make the episode as interesting as possible to both
Okay.
kinds of listeners. Of course, we're going to try to get your additional perspective on some of the same questions we ask every school, but also we might not dig as deep into the sort of granular stuff that probably hasn't changed as much in terms of the
Yeah.
school. But you are also our first musical side of the Carnegie Mellon musical theater faculty. So I'm going to burrow
Hey,
a bit deeper into the musical of it all.
nice.
Um, okay, I'm going to start you off with the hardest question of the day because we don't want to ease into it here. I want to start you off broad and difficult, which is just in taking over as area chair, I'd love to kind of hear like how did you see your role and what your goals were for the future of Carnegie Mellon drama? I mean, I know when Catherine was on, she talked about seeing herself as a bridge, a very Joe Biden relevant analogy. She was like, I'm sort of feel like a bridge from the old guard to the future of CMU, and she felt she had the expertise enough in one hand, but she knew she wasn't going to do it for a long period of time, and it seems like maybe that future is represented in you. So I'd love to hear like what is that vision and what did you see your role for what you were going to take for the past and how things were going to adapt in the future?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I have to tip my hat to my colleagues who has sat in this position before me. Catherine Moore, Don Wadsworth, Barbara Mackenzie Wood, Tony McKay, some of the most iconic
Mm-hmm.
acting musical theater professors of our time.
Mm-hmm.
They have truly built a program that we can firmly stand on. It has not required a significant amount of change over the
Mm-hmm.
7 years this is my seventh year coming up here. It has not required a significant amount of change because it really is a solidly developed sequence of
Yep.
education. Um, where I feel like I contribute most here is really taking a look at the professional work that I'm doing. I collaborate frequently with like Christopher Ashley and Kenny Leon, Tom Kitt, Joe Iconis, people who are sort of leading the charge in the commercial realm, and taking that information and going, okay, where are we learning this
Mm-hmm.
in our
Mm-hmm.
program, and how can we build new courses? How can we support what we are already doing, and just continue to sort of gear our students up to sort of take that jump from academia into the professional world. So that's been one of my primary goals here.
Yep.
Um,
Do you feel like, in the past, I think Carnegie Mellon would have been one of my easiest examples when you're talking about musical theater schools and the
yeah,
disciplines to say, well, that is an acting focused musical theater school. It's notable. You mentioned those 4 names right before you are all acting focused people. I mean, not singers, not, musicians necessarily. I actually don't know that none of them can sing. I'm sure they're fine at singing, but that's not their focus of their training or their expertise. Do you feel like there's any kind of shift with Carnegie Mellon with, bringing more music focus in terms of you as head, or is it staying similar? Would you still say this is an acting focused musical
I
theater
would
school?
still say it's still an acting focused program. I think, when I came in here and I had worked, all over, I spent 2 years at Shenandoah University, which was a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful program. Um, and coming from a sort of varied background from community college up through sort of other MT programs, seeing this program, I was skeptical. I was like,
Uh-huh.
"Huh, it's such an acting-based program. I don't know how our students are prepared to do this."
Mm-hmm.
Um, and after being here, I mean, even after just the first year, I was like, "Oh, when you leave college with a BFA in musical theater, your occupation is actor.
Mm-hmm.
Your agent is going to want to be able to put you out for a wide
Mm-hmm.
a breadth of roles, not just in the world of musical theater, which is just one genre of storytelling,
Yep.
under which there are multiple other genres. But like, there's television and film, there's plays, there's commercial work, there's all sorts of other kind of storytelling that you have to have an aptitude for.
Yes.
And when I look at our recent graduates, and that's across acting and MT, and I will say that is a pretty permeable wall in
Yes.
our building as well as in the industry.
Yes.
I see I see our students thriving in a multitude of genres and in a multitude of mediums, which I think is incredible,
Yeah.
like that. So I certainly don't want to take away from any of the acting focus. I'm actually sitting this week. We just hired a new professor to replace Gary Klein, who
Mhm.
put in 35 incredible years
Shout
um,
out, Gary.
building this musical theater program.
Mhm.
We stand on his shoulders and the incredible work that he did, and with our colleague Claudia Banak, who is still with
Mhm.
us here. Um, but we just brought in Michael McKelvey. I'm sitting down with Claudia and Michael to take a look at the entire musical theater sequence
Yep.
and like, where can we tighten this up? Where can we bring in some new ideas? I'm bringing back our scene and song class
Uh-huh.
with Michael teaching that to continue to bolster what we are doing there.
Yep.
I'm also currently working on a grant. I have a $250,000 grant right now from the Mellon Foundation. They have very generously funded the support to start planning a center for new work development housed at our
Very
university.
cool. Yep.
Because what I'm seeing nationally in the industry is that all of our new workspaces are sort of shutting down and we're losing funding for that.
Mhm.
And so why not start setting that up on the academic level in a fulsome way that is really feeding into our local Pittsburgh downtown scene
Mhm.
of Pittsburgh CLO, Civic Light Opera, the Pittsburgh Public, City Theater, the Kelly Strayhorn Theater, and then eventually nationally as well, so that we can be a developmental and workshop space. Our students can work alongside professionals
Yes.
and get that experience while they're here, because when they leave, that's what they do. They
Absolutely.
develop new work. I mean, when you look at the sort of iconic graduates of our program,
Mhm.
which to me, honestly, is pretty much everyone who's ever graduated from this program, because I've worked with so many of them, and they're so darn incredible to have in a room. But most of it's been on new work.
Yep.
Um,
It's so well said, and it's I'm glad that is coming for CMU because it feels like the ethos of a playground, which Catherine talked a lot about and was
yeah.
so I think instrumental to what Carnegie Mellon was trying to do. But
Mm.
it's so actor focused in some ways because it's very difficult in a short period of time to get together composers. I mean, people did it. Pigpen did it. It's
Yeah.
possible,
Oh, yeah.
but it's a lot harder to sort of put together all the pursuits of musical theater successfully without a little more structure and a little more help. The
Yeah.
playground of let's devise from nothing in a short period of time works well sometimes for acting, but with musical theater, a little bit of structure, bringing in some professionals to allow that devising
Yeah,
really
we'll
does
be
make sense.
working across the canon. So we'll be doing new musicals, new plays,
It's really
new
cool.
devised work.
Right
So
on.
really trying to vary that programming where we're sort of getting down to the brass tacks of a basic strategic plan, and hopefully we'll have a considerable amount of implementation funding from generous donors and foundation
Let's
support
hope so. Come on, Mellon
within
Foundation,
the
get in
next
there.
year. Yeah.
We love it. You already did a little bit of this, but I just love, Catherine talked about the sort of sequence of years 1 through 4 in terms of curriculum. You mentioned some what you're bringing back in terms of scene and song. Are there any other kind of like updates or changes to curriculum that you've seen in the past couple of years?
I don't know if Catherine did she talk about the culture class that Kyle Hayden
I think
developed?
beginning to. I think that was it was just maybe about to go into place when she brought it up.
Yeah, I mean, so the culture class was developed by Kyle Hayden at this school, and this fall is also going to be taught by Asar Stewart. Um, and it's part of the acting 3 sequence, and the acting 3 sequence in the third year, the junior year, is sort of centered around styles.
Hmm.
So
Back in the day, might have been focused on Shakespeare and Moliere, and now
yeah, I
expanding
mean,
a
in
little bit more.
the second year, to give you like a brief rundown, right? So the first year is a lot of exercises. It's a
Yeah.
lot of outside in work, inside out work, just sort of like discovering your instrument, responding to
Yep.
impulse, sharpening those skills,
Hmm.
right? Um, the second year is contemporary scene study in the fall, classical scene study in the spring, heightened text. Um, and then the third year has been styles. Historically, back in the day, there was Chekhov and there
Hmm.
was comedy
Yep.
and there was Greeks
Greek. Yep. Yep.
and all sorts of stuff like that, right? And so we've held on to much of that as well, because I do think it's important for us to have a knowledge of the history, a
Hmm.
knowledge of the various styles that have gotten us to today. You can't break rules until you know them,
Hmm.
right? So we should still stand on some of those foundational elements. So Tony McKay's teaching Greeks in the fall to our juniors, to half of them, while the other half take the culture class. And the culture class is scenes from plays that center historically marginalized identities.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be anything from race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, um, faith, religion,
Mm-hmm.
spirituality. Um, and so that's helping students to navigate the representation of that identity, how that aligns with themselves,
Yep.
and also how to navigate speaking about that and communicating about that within a room,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is so important right now going into today's
Yes.
industry.
Yes. Yes.
And then the spring of acting three, that's one aspect of it. The spring of acting three, so we do mini courses in acting three, 7 weeks at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Will be comedy taught by Tony McKay.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to go from vaudevillian comedy through sitcom and sketch comedy, all the way up to contemporary plays and comedy
Mm-hmm.
there. Kyle is going to teach a newer collaboration class, which is essentially going to be about having a writer in the room and
Mm-hmm.
having a dramaturg and a director working with
Mm-hmm.
you. And how do we navigate the conversations around working with the new piece and trying to make something work as it's still developing,
Yep. And are these
and having
MFA
that
writers,
feed
these
on us
MFA?
on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm. I was saying, are these MFA playwrights who are coming in and
Yeah,
doing?
so we're probably going to recruit some of our MFA playwrights and also bring in some outside professionals to
Uh-huh.
work as well. I think that we're going to offer it as an elective to our to some of our directing grad program
Uh-huh.
students, as well as some of our dramaturgs in the undergraduate program.
Really cool. This is so helpful. And then what about, where Catherine didn't go as deep? I mean, she certainly spoke toward, but I'd love to hear you speak a little toward the sort of music side of the musical theater thing. So from a voice training perspective, you mentioned scene and song, voice lab, all the different things that you take. What is the kind of progression from year 1 to 4 as a singer or as a musician at Carnegie Mellon?
Sure. Yeah. So, just in terms of like voice study and private voice, our students receive a 45-minute lesson once a week for the first 3 years. And that's with either Michael McKelvey, our new hire, or Claudia Benak,
Mm-hmm.
who has been here for many years, taught Leslie and Kara Lindsay and Megan Hilty and all those fun
Well,
folks.
Leslie's the only one who gets a single name. That's interesting.
Oh, oh.
No, I just understand. No, it's good. It's that you've reached the level when you only have to say one name. That's pretty good.
Truly, right? Yeah, and so the two of them are incredibly well adept in vocal technique. Both of them have high level degrees in classical voice,
Mm-hmm.
but then also have the knowledge of functional voice training and
Mm-hmm.
science based teaching, and understand how to navigate all of the styles.
Mm-hmm.
So our students get a rich education there, vocally, and then in the fourth year all of the students in the MT program transfer to my studio,
Mm-hmm.
where we focus on vocal coaching, getting them sort of industry ready. I
Mm-hmm.
work a lot on, they're often getting auditions in that year and preparing for showcase,
Yep.
and then also fully in production. So then I'm also coaching all of that work as well.
Mm-hmm.
um, and then in the musical theater sequence, the first year is predominantly music skills. We have two fantastic professors, Mark Domensic and Giovanna Reyes-Mir, who
Mm-hmm.
teach music skills to our students. They're divided into two different levels, one that's more advanced and one that's a little bit more introductory, depending on where the students are coming from. I mean, you're talking about 6 students in each
Yep.
class. The focus of it, I've tried to emphasize to both Mark and Giovanna, the focus is I need them to be able to read music,
Uh-huh.
right? They need to be musically literate by the end of this year.
Yep. So you
And
don't need to be an expert playing piano, but you need to be able to teach yourself a song.
exactly, right.
ABCD.
Like, you need to be able to look at a score in a rehearsal, understand
Mm-hmm.
what the music director is talking about, and be able to read it accurately.
Yep.
And so that's been really successful. They've sort of shifted gears to like, what are the skill sets that build toward that?
Mm-hmm.
What are the necessary understandings of harmony and structure? And then like, how do we get this to be a practical skill set?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So much of our training in this building is very much about sort of the practicality,
Yep.
right? Like, how do we practically apply this in a situation when we are moving toward production?
Mm-hmm.
Um, that is not to consider its own merit on its own as a field of study, but how do we use this now,
For sure. Well,
right?
especially when you're doing this many different disciplines, you have to zero in a little bit. You can't learn all of music and all of dance and all of acting.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that was year one.
So that's predominantly the first year of musical theater instruction. The second year is literature and repertoire, which is sort of like a vocal styles class combined with a history class,
Mm-hmm.
where we essentially go, and Claudia teaches this in tandem with one of our dramaturgy professors, Amanda Olmsted, and they go through the history of musical theater and the decades. Songs are assigned to students. They work on those things stylistically, but then also understand the history that went into those things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then in the spring, acting a song. And so that goes through acting techniques within a musical context.
Mm-hmm.
And then the junior year is a cabaret mini. So we do half a mini this fall.
Mm-hmm.
It's not totally official, but I feel like I can share this here. Tom Kitt is going to come as our guest.
Let's go. Friend of the pod, Tom Kitt. Let's go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Super excited, and we will sort of honor his songbook, and we'll
Mm-hmm.
do a concert with our 12 junior MTs downtown at the Greer Cabaret Theater.
Cool.
They very generous. The Pittsburgh Cultural Trust very generously offers their space to us. So we work on that and work within that. I mean, past composer guests have been last year was Stephen Schwartz,
Mm-hmm.
at David Yazbek. We had Janine Tesori during the pandemic via
Mm-hmm.
Zoom. Stephen Flaherty, Kerrigan Loudermilk, Kuman
Mm-hmm.
and Diamond, Adam Guan, Andrew Lippa. And so, yeah, Tom's one of my very favorite composers and also a great collaborator of
Yep.
mine. So he's going to be our guest. We'll do that for a mini, and then Michael's going to actually work on some scene and song work
Yep.
with the students for the rest of that semester after we complete the cabaret.
And what is the focus of a scene in a song class?
Well, I think for that, a lot of the prior training, and especially like in musical theater here, is a lot of solo work, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you're working a lot on solo voice. You're working
Mm-hmm.
a lot within solo songs. Our voice lab that we have once a week. I'm sure folks have seen the videos
Oh, yes.
of the
The
they call
YouTube.
them the dusty red curtains. They are not dusty red curtains. They are mauve. But yes, in our Checo studio,
Yep.
yeah, I'm sure you've seen videos of all sorts of folks who have done that for years,
Mm-hmm.
on YouTube. But it's important that we also start to integrate, just as we do in our acting classes,
Uh-huh.
what it is to do ensemble work, what it is to go from a book scene into a song, time out a book scene to underscore with. I mean, Richard Rodgers wrote those underscores of those golden age scenes so darn beautifully
Uh-huh.
to capture exactly what he wanted out of the scene. So yeah, it'll be a little bit more of that sort of ensemble based work. And then the spring of the junior year, I teach a musical theater audition class, because I'm often in professional rooms at the
Mm-hmm.
Telsey office or Tara Rubin looking at folks for various projects, or on EcoCast.
Mm-hmm.
So I get to sort of give students a little bit of a way into that. Also, really making sure that their books are feeling solid before they go into their senior year. Because that's really when they're going to start booking work outside of just the summer stock season.
Yep.
And so their book should be reflective of what they need for the professional world and who they are now, as opposed to necessarily, I know some schools do an MT audition class
Mm-hmm.
earlier in the process.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, they haven't had all the skill sets yet.
That's
So
right.
let's let's
And
let's
personal
put it
growth.
here so
Yeah.
that it's teeing them up for success in that senior year
Right.
and beyond.
Well, let's get into the senior year and beyond. I mean, Catherine talked a little bit about the showcase process as it stood, but it was really in the middle of COVID. It was pretty early COVID, and it was all digital at that point. How has that changed? And I guess, where are we now from a digital and in-person perspective of what am I leaving school with as I'm launching into the business in terms of being
Yeah.
produced?
So, I mean, our school was one of the first schools to do a showcase.
Mhm.
That was like 30 years ago or so.
Back we called them leagues back in the day. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. And so, I think most programs have sort of latched onto that model. I will say that I think ours is very well attended.
Mm-hmm.
We have a database of 1,100 individuals that we invite to our showcases. We do them in New York and Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
We've sort of I've fiddled around with the model since I've been chair in, I took the baton from Catherine, in June of 2022. And I was just looking at sort of like attendance records and how we can like make this as least stressful for the students,
Mm-hmm.
and also condense this as much as possible so that they also have enough time for meetings and appointments
Yep.
later in the week as they are in those two cities. So yeah, we now do 5 performances of our showcase in New York. We've tested out some various spaces. We've been at Theater Row. This past year, we were at Signature Theater, which was fantastic,
Mhm.
on 42nd Street. I think that's where we will stay for Showcase 2025. That's the plan. We do 5 performances in New York. Our showcase runs about 60 to 75 minutes. You're seen by multitudes of casting directors,
Mhm.
agents, managers, producers, writers, network executives. Um, and then those folks either do direct outreach with our students, or they come through the school, and we have like a whole system of gathering that data and getting that to students. Um, yeah.
It's such an interesting
So
question. I mean, I've now, as we're in, I think it's podcast number 180. As we've talked to a lot of smaller schools about the different who do have showcases. Some, not all, still have showcases, but many now do, and the different ways they're trying to innovate. Partially because they don't necessarily have the attendance of a school like
yeah.
Carnegie Mellon, and but it's really interesting hearing all the kind of creative ways that they're using their showcase experience. And it makes me wonder of like how you think about innovation when you have something that is working very well, that has
Yeah, I mean, I
how do
think
you keep updated and how do you
yeah,
use
I mean, I think, I have considered it as well, because I came from the tradition of a more musical theater centered, uh, showcase,
Uh-huh.
um, which really only caters to the needs of some very narrow, like a very narrow lane of sort of representation and casting,
Mhm.
right? As opposed to the showcase that we do really is scenes and songs. We aren't
Yep.
doing any dancing. We aren't doing any ensemble work.
Yep.
We are looking at scenes and songs. So you can really see this person as an individual, unique artist, which is
Yep.
sort of the hallmark of our program.
Yep.
Um, and you can see them sort of how they work within that scene. You can see how they do solo work as as a singer, as a singing actor, and how that acting work is integrated into their song work.
Yep.
So yeah, it's proven to be a pretty successful model here,
Yep.
and not something that I'm eager to change. Um, but yeah, so in addition to New York, we also do 3 performances in LA at the Gary
Mhm.
Marshall Theater in Burbank. And the students are put up in hotels there by the school. And that's actually a little bit more in depth also, because we also have our other design options and directing
Yep.
options there with us at the same time.
And do you
Um,
have a sense with recent classes, in terms of what percentage of the cohort in general of the 24 end up in New York versus LA? And I guess also I'm interested of you talk about that permeable membrane, which I think is so true in the outside world. Certainly people who are actors then end up doing musicals, but certainly musical people will end up in LA doing TV and film. Do you have a sense of sort of how where people tend to go of the musical theaters? Do they mostly start in New York? Do actors, how many in LA? Do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, I mean, like, our MTs tend to gravitate toward New York. That is sort of like the center, the
Mhm.
epicenter of musical theater making. But well, in the recent years, I've seen a handful of them go to Chicago or LA.
Mhm.
Some folks try it out in one city and then move.
Mhm.
It just sort of depends on where the work is coming from, and I don't think there needs to be a plan for any one of them. Like, we are now at a place also. I forgot to mention, we also do virtual stuff,
Yes. Yep.
as well for our showcase, virtual materials.
Yep.
So on our website for our showcase, we have profiles for every single student, resume, 2 scenes that are fully produced,
Mhm.
on film, a reel of any of their material that they wish to share there, as well as a song or a monologue. Most of the
Mhm.
MTs do songs, most of the actors do monologues.
Mhm.
But yeah, like, you can really, at this point, you can position yourself anywhere in the country.
Totally.
If you want to live in Pittsburgh for the rest of your life, you can,
Yep.
and make that your home base, and then go to New York when duty calls.
Yep. And we talked to a couple, two previous CMU alum, Ian Harding and Corey Cott, who both seem to be living in the South and just sending videos in and flying up when they need to fly up because
Yeah,
that's the digital world we live in. Um,
yeah,
yeah. We talked a little bit about cost with Catherine too, and of course we know CMU is not a cheap school. We have
it isn't.
tuition prices in the 60 thousands of dollars. Just how does it work in terms of currently with scholarship money for academic money versus money from the drama school itself, need-based money? How are you finding that? I know
Yeah,
you've had some students recently who've gotten great scholarship packages that they
yeah.
how
So,
does that work?
let me set the record straight on all of this.
Oh yes, set
So,
it straight.
so yes, tuition is just under $65,000 a year.
Mhm.
First year expenses, room and board, housing, food, all of that, totaling around $18,000 on top of that. So you're
That would be
looking
an
at
expensive car loan, Rick. That'd be a
a
Tesla.
really nice car. Yeah,
Mhm.
really nice car. Fortunately, CMU is a need-based financial aid institution. So that is to say that if your FAFSA
Yep.
recognizes that your family makes at or below a certain threshold, some folks get the entire tuition bill covered,
Mhm.
right? So, yeah, we are predominantly need-based aid.
Uh-huh. Yep.
There is a limited amount of scholarship
Yep.
based on talent.
Yep.
And so that is awarded, but I would say that ranges in the $10,000 to $15,000 range.
And nothing academically. You're not gonna get big academic money from CMU.
No, not
Yeah.
really.
Yep.
Um,
You
but I
can't say the
will
word
say
FAFSA on a
that
podcast like this, Rick.
that $10,000 to $15,000 scholarship is typically, like, that's sort of the maximum threshold in
Right.
terms of, like, scholarship funding,
Yep.
but that is a guaranteed award for all 4 years.
Uh-huh. That
Um,
if you get it, you
Whereas
get it
your
in for free.
financial aid package shifts and fluctuates based on your income from year to year.
Yep. I was just making the joke that you can't say the word FAFSA on this podcast, Rick. After
It's
last year, and now it seems like it's going to be this year. They've said again it's delayed till I think it's December 1st or whatever. So it's not a. It's like it
Thank
bleeps out automatically on here.
Yeah. I will say, despite all of that, I mean, we moved our acceptance day back from May 1st to May 15th.
Yep.
And I will say that the CSS profile estimates that
Yep.
our students received were pretty
They
accurate
were.
within a couple of thousand
Yep.
dollars.
Yep.
So that at least is giving me some solace
Yep.
to the news that I saw in the New York Times
And
last week.
if you're early in your process and you're hearing words like CSS profile and going, "What the heck's going on?" Don't worry about it. Well, you'll learn about it eventually as you get into it a little more.
Lots
Um,
of forms.
Lots of forms. We talked, we all know Carnegie Mellon is an elite academic university. And I think this, I don't think I talked about this with Catherine or Don, but I think it's a confusion off of our students. Sometimes if they have, low grades, they'll go, well, I can no chance to get into Carnegie Mellon. It's such a great academic university. Talk to me like, how does that balance of this really conservatory style education, but then happening to be at what is 24th best academic university or whatever it is in
Yeah.
the country. How does that balance work in terms of admission, in terms of how the process of the school itself goes?
Sure. So, I mean, first and foremost, for our programs, your artistic audition, your artistic application is what is considered most heavily,
Hmm.
right? So
Do
the
you
work
have a
that you do.
percentage that you'd weigh on that? Is it 80%? Is it nine? Where would you say?
I don't know.
75%?
I would say it's predominantly that.
Predominantly. Yes.
Yes. Um,
Love it.
and I say that because, when you're looking at anywhere from 1,500 to 3,000 pre-screens
Yep.
for 12 and 12,
Yep.
right? Um, and then, we'll see 300 or 400 actors, 300 or 400 MT auditions. And then from there, we get 12 students and 12 students in acting and MT, respectively. What I would say there is that the artistic application is really what allows us to sort of narrow that number down,
Yep.
to sort of the top candidates. And that's really where we go through with admissions, and they go through with a fine-tooth comb through transcripts.
Yep.
What we're looking for essentially are avoiding folks who have a lot of D's and F's.
Uh-huh. So you're talking truly red flags. It said below a
Yeah.
2.0, we're going, might be an issue.
Yeah, like, if you have D's and F's, that's like maybe, especially in the acting track where you have a few more electives required than the MTs within the university,
Yep.
you may not be as successful here.
Yep.
Because these courses will challenge you, and so if you're struggling with your courses in high school,
Right.
that may be a challenge. I
Because
will
even with the
say,
drama program, there might be a history class, or there's classes, even if it's about
yeah,
drama, that it's still an academic class. There's
but
an
I will
academic element.
say that, like, there have been students who have had D's and F's.
Yep.
Who we have advocated for because they are incredibly talented, and maybe they didn't have access to the tools that they needed, or maybe they were going through something very specific in their high school years. Something was happening at home or personally, medically, whatever
Yep.
that case may be. And we have offices and support programs at our institution that will help folks navigate through that.
Yep.
So, yeah, I would not let your grades stand
Yep.
in the way of pursuing a dream of coming here.
Now Rick has said it, not me. So they don't believe me when I say that, but now
Yeah,
you've said it, they're going to believe.
truly.
And it's really confusing because that is different than how a Michigan, which is also an elite academic university
Yeah,
and elite musical theater school, that's different
truly.
than how they work. If you're at a 2.0, you might not apply to a Michigan in the same way that you would for
Yeah.
Carnegie Mellon.
Yeah, I think, the different they're a state school, right?
Yeah, well, and they're also a more academic school. There are more academics that they're going to require, right? I
Yeah.
mean, because as an MT, I mean, how many academic classes are you taking in the total of your 4 years at Carnegie Mellon?
I mean, you take your computing class, which is like a basic math course. You
Yep,
take a composition class, interp.
yep,
Uh, you take global histories,
yep.
and then most of your other courses are
Right,
all
right,
embedded into your program already as an MT. As an actor, there are like 5 additional electives
right.
that you have to cover.
That's why I was when I was there. I mean, I think people are sometimes shocked to hear that, especially knowing it's a good academic university, just how little total academics there are outside of
Yeah. Yeah,
music
I mean,
theater.
it's not necessarily that there aren't academic courses. It's just that we have a in the first year, all of our students are required to take an anti-racist and equitable practices in theater course,
Hmm.
which was something that I had rallied for along with my colleagues as we were working through the pandemic. Um, and we have the fantastic Kaya Dunn, one of the nation's leading cultural competency and intimacy coordinators,
Hmm.
um, teaching that course. But that counts as one of their sort of like academic accreditation check marks.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, I'll wrap up this section with just the often it's how I start this interview is just to talk about having taught at different universities and seen different kind of young actors, both in terms of at the university level and also I just know you've worked with a lot of young actors,
Yeah.
at 17, 18 who are looking at these schools. What do you think makes the ethos of a Carnegie Mellon student different? Like what when you meet the class of 12 and 12 and you go, this is what makes someone feel like a Carnegie Mellon student. What does that feel like in terms of if there's some sort of defining ethos?
Sure. I don't know that there's like a defining ethos, but I can give you sort of like these are some of the attributes that we definitely look for and
Hmm.
sort of like assess in the auditions. But when I'm saying this, and so this is for everyone listening, do not try to change yourself to hit
Okay,
all of
these
these
attributes.
marks.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, they probably already live within you.
yep,
So don't stress about it.
yep,
But like, so these are some of the things, obviously preparedness and confidence, right?
yep.
Like our students are always prepared. They come into class prepared. They are ready to work.
Hmm.
They are game. They are excited to play,
Hmm.
right? Within that, a spirit of playfulness, like a sense of dexterity and flexibility in your work.
Hmm.
Willingness to try new ideas and approaches without fear or judgment,
Hmm.
right? There's sort of that like level of inhibition that we want to make sure that our students are steering clear of.
Hmm.
That like you're going to stay open and you're going to try things, and this may feel silly,
Hmm.
but there's a point to it, right? As long as that's not crossing any personal boundaries, then we're good.
Hmm.
Embodied work, physical presence, utilization of the entire body as an instrument, the ability to connect, a sense
Hmm.
of vulnerability, openness, empathy, understanding of the human condition, authenticity,
Hmm.
living presently in the moment, not just as rehearsed. Those are sort of like the hallmarks to me of characteristics of a young person coming into this program. And some may be here with those and some may be here with those,
Yep.
but like those are the things that we're going to continue through various skill sets, exercises, techniques, continue to hone in on.
I love it. All right. That's what a great place to take a quick little break. And then on the back end, we'll jump into some of the audition room and how we sniff for some of those very words, of those very
Okay.
ideas.
Okay, good.
All right, we are back with the amazing Rick Edinger, and we're talking about the audition and application process. And I love you mentioned a kind of laundry list of what you're looking for in students. I'd love to talk a little bit about in the audition process. How do you sniff for those things? So how do you look at, and especially maybe we can talk through the pre-screen process and then in the live audition. How are you looking at questions of kind of raw skill and maybe
Mhm.
specifically raw musical skill? I know we don't see the dance in the live audition.
Correct.
How are we looking for those things and then weighing some of these? Some of that list was a little bit more holistic in terms of who you are as a human being. How did those kind of weigh in terms of like amazing
Right.
singer, really
That's
competent
yeah.
actor, and the holistic? How do you think about those things?
Yeah, I mean, so I will say that an audition at Carnegie Mellon is probably a little bit different than most of your other auditions.
Mhm.
We don't we're not auditioning live a large swath of students.
And can you say those numbers again? You said it was almost 3,000 sometimes pre-screens, but then down to 3 to 400.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think we hit 300 in MT last year. I think we did, and those aren't quotas, by the way.
Right.
Like, if there were 500 folks that felt like they might
Right.
be a good fit for us, we would have had 500 slots for
But
MT.
my quick math says that's as little as 10%. That's the smallest percentage we've heard yet
Yeah.
on the podcast. That,
Yeah, so I mean, like, I think we auditioned 280 or so
yeah.
last year
Yep.
for MT, and then just over 350 or so for acting.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, so we spend time with each student. I mean, you come in, I'm gonna let you sing your 2 selections that you're really excited about,
Yep.
and, you show me you share with us what you feel strongest is
Yep.
strongest with you. I don't need that to hit any marks vocally or stylistically. Just wanna get a sense of, like, who you are and what you do well right now, not your aspirations of, like, "I
Uh-huh.
really hope my head voice develops."
Yep.
Right? What we will often do in the singing portion of the audition, now I'm saying that just to delineate the 2 kinds of rooms that you're in when in our
Yep.
auditions. You have sort of your musical theater room, which is where you'll be singing songs
Mhm.
and acting in that. And then also your acting room or your
Mhm.
monologue room, right?
Where you might sing as well. You never know.
I mean,
Really.
truly, truly, truly. Which I ain't gonna lie, there have been times when I've brought an MT to an acting room and said, "Listen, watch this kid do this song."
Uh-huh. Yep.
Right? Yeah, like, maybe that wasn't present in their monologue work,
Uh-huh.
but watch what they do when they're in a musical setting.
Totally. Yep.
And, that's the way in for some people. That was a way in for me.
Mhm.
So in our room, me and Claudia will sit there, with each student. We'll listen to those first 2 songs. We'll probably ask for at least a third.
Yep.
Sometimes we will continue digging through your book.
Yep.
What else you got?
Yep.
Often I'll be like, "What's your favorite song?"
Yep.
Like, what is your go-to song? I say this all the time. What is your go-to song when you just need to listen to something to decompress, or you
Mhm.
need to, like, just, like, clear your mind, you're having, like, you're in your feels today. I go to, like, Adele's, version of "Make You Feel My Love,"
Mm.
the Bob
Mhm.
Dylan tune, right?
Mhm.
I think it's one of the most perfectly written pop songs. Um,
Mhm.
I don't care if it's in your book. I don't want it to be in your book.
Mhm.
I don't want it to be something you've prepared. Let
Mhm.
me hear something that you're excited to share that just feels like you.
Mhm.
Um And then, if the material that you're sharing is predominantly in a chest dominant sound, right? Maybe we're going to ask you to do some exercises with
Uh-huh.
us. Let's sing a phrase or 2 of this and let's do it in your head voice.
Uh-huh.
Hey, can you make this sound? Right?
Uh-huh.
We'll sit there and play with you and work with you. It feels a little bit more like a workshop or a lesson than it feels like we're sitting here, adjudicating your skill set.
Yep. No, I
Um,
mean, I think CMU is infamous for these, not only the multi-part auditions, but these long auditions, sometimes traveling from room to room, getting adjustments, additional material. And I think, not aside from, of course, our students are always trying to go, what does it mean? They sent me from me. What does that mean? That we don't have to go deep into that. But I guess, what are you looking for when you're asking for that third, fourth, fifth song, when you're giving some of these wacky adjustments, which maybe that's more the monologue room, but I think really it happens in both rooms. What are you looking for in the redirects, in the adjustment? What are you sort of hoping to see? Because obviously you're not just wasting your time. You want to see,
yeah.
what are you
No,
looking
I mean,
for from
like,
the student?
ultimately, we're looking for, like, do you have access to this?
Mm,
Right? Like, it's not even about you being able to do it. I mean, if you are predominantly a belter, I keep using that as an example, so I'm going to flip it. Right? If
yep.
you're predominantly someone who sings in sort of like Western Euro classical soprano world,
Hmm.
right? And belting or mixing is new to you, right? We might just we might play around with some exercises like, oh, can you make this sound?
Hmm.
Right? Doesn't have to be perfect, but can you access it? Because if you can access it today, just like sitting here, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but you
Hmm.
you can at least, like, touch on it,
Yep.
then we know that we'll be able to help you build that,
Uh-huh. Yep.
right? So it's really like looking where are you succeeding right now,
Hmm.
and where are you still developing? And within that developing skill set, are you able to just like touch on some things? And
Uh-huh.
are you able to like find a point of access where we might be able to help you like dig a little deeper and cultivate that?
Yep. And you
Right?
mentioned
That's
already
really
the
what those
gameness,
things
the
are about. Yeah, it's not about, like, you not doing good enough work. It's not
yep,
about you not having the skill set. No one cares about that.
yep. Yeah. I mean, I was saying you mentioned already the gameness, I
Yeah,
think that is certainly of the students that we've seen be really successful in a Carnegie Mellon room. It's not necessarily just the most flexibly skilled people, but the people who are willing to show that vulnerability and
yeah,
play and go, okay, here's where I am versus the like, I have everything perfectly prepared in every single way.
yeah.
It seems like they're often looking for that plus a flexibility
Yeah,
plus a
I
vulnerability.
often warn people not to, like, coach things within an inch of their lives.
Hmm.
Like, you don't have to have a plan for the entire thing, right? We start to, like, clench our work so tightly
Yes.
that we just can't let go.
Yep. And I'll
And
often say, like, to some
sometimes
extent, that is bad coaching too. If it's coached within the inch of your life that you feel it's that way, then I'm like, I don't know that you've necessarily been prepared
that doesn't
for
happen
the
with
room, but
MTCA coaches, though.
that's right. That's
Many
what
of
I'm
the
saying.
MTCA co I know many of the MTCA coaches, many of them are CMU grads,
Yeah.
and tho I mean, and Nathan, my goodness,
Yep.
I bow down to her. I think she's brilliant, and Telly and Leo and all of you folks, like,
But
you're
and it's a big part of what we try to do is to prepare for that flexibility. You're not prepared for I could get shot and nothing would change. You're
yeah,
prepared for a place of going, what if this happens? How can I stay flexible and adapt?
yeah, yeah.
Um, Liz, you mentioned a little already the Office of Mission looking for kind of red flags within an academic application. Do you interact at all with the academic application? Are you reading essays, letters of rec? No.
So, letters of recommendation and transcripts go to the Office of Admission,
Yep.
right? So all of your artistic stuff that is uploaded onto Get Accepted is stuff that we see.
Yep.
So we see all of your videos that
Yep.
we have access to. We see your resume and we see your essay.
Yep.
And I will say I do read the essays.
Yep.
I will say for every pre-screen, I look at your every single video. I look at
Yep.
your monologues and songs, even though I am an MT faculty,
Yep.
right? Because I know that if your monologues are weak,
Yep.
or if this is a developing skill set, that would be a red flag, and you may not be admitted for us, right? It would be a red flag for our acting
Right.
faculty,
And it seems
right?
that's part of
So
the process is you want for the MTs, they want to get a yes from both,
yeah.
right? That it's
And
not
I will
just
watch those
you.
videos right up to the end, friends.
Right.
I'm not making a quick judgment on the first 20 seconds. I mean,
I love it.
I will say, like, those first 20 seconds mean a lot,
Yeah.
but
You'll stick with it.
I will stick with it, like, right to the end, because if you're taking the time to audition for us, regardless of how many of applications there are,
Yep.
I wanna make sure that you're having a fair shot. Like, coming to this school and having access to the opportunities that you get as a student is not something that I take lightly,
Yep.
and not any of our faculty take lightly.
Yep. I love that. And you're saying maybe for the ones that pass the pre-screen, that's when you'll read the essay?
Yeah, yeah. So the ones who pass the pre-screen and who book those live auditions, I read the essays and I review their pre-screens before they come in.
Yep. I love it.
So often, I'll be able to reference like, oh, I loved this work on this. Would you mind singing that again in person?
Yep.
If it's something that you didn't decide to sing today. Yeah.
I love it. I'd love to talk about what else you think about as you're filling out your class, and this may also help us transition into some of the work that you've done from the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Like,
Mhm.
how do you how do you think about your consciousness of gender balance, height balance, size balance, racial diversity, neurodiversity? How do you think of as you're putting together a class of 24?
Yeah.
How are you thinking about that as you're mapping it all together and building a class together?
I think what I am often reminded of is just not everyone has access to the same tools,
Hmm.
right? But if the raw skills are there, our program is very well adept. I mean, we have had students who have never done shows before
Hmm.
get into our program.
Hmm.
The only shows they have ever done before they go out into their career and have a fantastic career.
Hmm.
I can think of one student like now that has been here since I've been here, that is doing very well, but came in with not much,
Hmm.
right? Like not much experience and training prior
Yep.
to CMU, and is doing beautifully, right? So there's that sort of like leveling of the playing field there, right? Like you can
Yep.
have all the coaching in the world, or you could have no coaching in the world, and you can still get into this school.
Yes.
Um, I definitely want to ensure that our program is filled with unique, diverse perspectives of all different lived experiences, and that can be from financial backgrounds and communities and rural communities and
Mhm.
metropolitan communities, people from historically marginalized communities.
Mhm.
But I will say that it isn't a deciding factor in what we
Mhm.
do, right?
You're
Uh,
meaning you're not looking for, "I need a certain amount of this and a certain amount of
no,
that." It's this would be a
no.
factor, but not a deciding factor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's just that's like added material on top of all of it,
Mhm.
right?
And I'd love to transition into, so in your work as a co-chair of this committee, Catherine talked about this was really early pandemic and recently post George Floyd. A lot of universities came forward with kind of very strong statements and a lot of bold intentions. I mean, in the broader university landscape, and of course with Carnegie Mellon as well, how do you see schools continuing that work into 2024 and
So
2025? Do you see
what I
successful
will
follow through?
say, the thing that makes me really proud about CMU as a school of drama is that within that DEI work, and especially at 2020, I mean, we had a DEI committee long before I even came here. It was started
Hmm.
by Tomei Cousin, who was my co-chair. Our committee no longer exists, actually,
Oh, okay.
because it's also on all of us to
Hmm.
uphold these values. It's not exclusive to a committee that
Hmm.
should be sort of making sure that everyone is adhering to these values, but
Yep.
instead, this is now a core value of every single professor, every single student in this space.
Hmm.
We actually advocated as a committee to have an associate dean for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also advocated for a professorship in anti-racist and equitable practices in theater and cultural competency, which resulted in the hire of Kaya Dunn.
Hmm.
So the thing of CMU is that, I mean, we out of that town hall that we had 48 hours after the murder of George Floyd,
Hmm.
we gathered 26 typewritten single spaced font 10
Hmm.
pages of testimonies in a 4-hour meeting.
Hmm.
And then our committee went through that and highlighted every opportunity for action, organized them into 9 different umbrellas, created subcommittees within that, and then went to work.
Yep.
And that is the thing. And I mean, the university pitched in, I'd say, just shy of a $500,000
Uh-huh.
to make sure that that work could get done,
Yep.
from various resources, not from any one line of funding, but
Yep.
we knocked on every door and banged down every door that was standing in the way of getting this work done, and it's still a work in progress.
Yep.
But now I think the way that I try to manage that now as a chair is, I don't think anything in this world is unsolvable without, or everything in this world is solvable with
Yep.
clear, direct communication and dialogue.
Yep. I'd love to talk a little specifically about gender. I mean, I'm not 100% certain, but I believe you're our first professor on the podcast that
Yeah,
uses a pronoun set that's not
yeah,
exclusively he or she.
totally.
How do you see conversations around the gender binary happening at Carnegie Mellon or just in universities in general? It does seem like anecdotally to me, this is a place where some very well-intentioned professors stumble, especially if they're a little bit older, that they go, I'm not totally sure I understand our students. Because, of course, a lot of our students understand the gender spectrum maybe differently than
Yeah,
millennials.
yeah, totally. And I'm happy to live in that umbrella as well. I think, uh, we've done a lot to educate our faculty. I have resources literally sitting on my desk.
Hmm.
For anyone who has not read this,
This is Beyond the Gender Binaries being held up as a book for those not watching on YouTube.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. It's a fabulous book. A great introduction to
Hmm.
understanding, the lived experiences of others,
Yep.
especially within the world of gender. And so, yeah, I mean, our faculty does a pretty solid job of allowing students space to do that. We have several non-binary students throughout all of our classes.
Hmm.
I mean, several out of 12 in
Yep.
each class.
Yep.
But uh, yeah, and they're allowed to, if it doesn't matter if they're assigned male at birth, assigned female at birth.
And how
Um,
does that work with casting and scenes and stuff like that? Yeah.
Yeah. We even within our casting, our students are able to either self-identify in the way that they would like to. There's a
Mhm.
private forum that is kept just between our casting director and our students.
Mhm.
What kind of work they are interested in exploring, what kind of facets of their identity they are interested in exploring in their work,
Mhm.
and what kind of what facets of their identity they're maybe not ready to explore in their
Yep.
work, and they don't want to bring into the space in their work at least,
Yep.
right? And so our students are able to have agency within that. We do, I mean, it's all consent based teaching,
Yep.
right? Whether that's physical consent or also just in terms of our identity and what it is that we want to bring into the room and have dialogue around.
I love it. All right. Well, I want to be conscious of time as we're hitting our hour mark here.
Yeah.
I'm skipping some questions. I was going to ask you about your book. There's so many things we're going to ask, but maybe we can wrap with just a little bit of advice to parents. You've seen a lot of parents in this process, and a lot of our listeners, of course, are parents. What advice do you have in terms of how to support their child through this college process?
Trust in the process. I know everyone's going to say that, but it's true. Trust in the process. It's rigorous and it's intense. Believe in your student.
Hmm.
Believe in your student. You have to be their biggest support network. If you don't believe in them, like that's where our foundations of self-worth are in our
Hmm.
familial relationships, our parental relationships, our guardian relationships. This career is filled with no's.
Hmm.
And I want you to remember, and I parents, I hope you will remind your students that I said this coming from one of the top programs in the country.
Hmm.
The no's do not matter.
Hmm.
And that includes a no from us.
Hmm.
The no's will not change your life. The yeses will. So encourage your student to keep finding the yeses. Remind them. Keep an open mind, right? We may be your dream school, but there may not be a seat here.
Hmm.
But there may be some other some a seat somewhere else.
Hmm.
Remember that you will grow wherever you are planted. Not every gardener is well adept at growing every type of flower or plant,
Hmm.
right? So you have to find the team of gardeners that is going to best help you cultivate what you have to grow.
Hmm. So well said. So well said. So, Rick, if people want more information, they're listening to 3 episodes of the podcast. They haven't got enough. Where should they check out more information? Do we like social media's website? Where would we send them to for primary
Yeah, I
information?
mean, I would say like the most our website, this actual CMU School of Drama website,
Mm-hmm.
which is drama.cmu.edu.
Mm-hmm.
That has literally everything. Like it's got you can go full curricular maps for the acting and MT program. It has old videos of former leadership. We're actually revamping our entire website
Mm-hmm.
and will be launched probably mid fall.
Yep.
And so we'll have some new videos, production videos, all
But
sorts.
you're not going to get mauve curtains there, is what you're saying. There's
I
mauve
know.
curtains only on the YouTubes or on
Only
the
on the YouTube.
Instagrams. Yeah.
Only on the YouTube. Look up
Love.
CMU Voice Lab. I'm sure you'll find lots of things.
I so appreciate the time, Rick. Thanks
Yeah.
so much for it.
Yeah, my pleasure.